You're listening to The Moose and the Loose, your 10 minutes action-packed financial podcast with your host, Mike Yahoo.
Hey, what's up, Market Moose? This is Mike from The Moose on the Loose. Sorry, guys, I am late, but I got a good excuse. Yesterday, I was at the Buffalo Bills game. Buffalo, New York. And I drove all the way back, and this morning it was a bit chaotic. I had to drive my son to school, and he forgot half of his stuff, so I had to do the double back and forth between home and school. So here I am recording past 9 a.m., but I did not want to let you down, so here I am. Today, we are going to keep up with the sport analogy. I have a DSR member, Dividend Stocks Rock member, Jean, that sent me an email a couple of weeks ago, and he explained me how he managed his portfolio in terms of how to evaluate the weight, the position of each of those stocks. And he brought in a very interesting way to do it. So, when you look at your portfolio, and I don't know if you're like this, but when I look at my portfolio, most of the time I look at my top stocks, like the biggest position, and the smallest one I tried to rebalance, and I kind of forgot about all the others in between. And when I just look at the positions, of course I review each of them quarterly, reviewing the earnings. But when it's time to make some trim, so I'm thinking about on my side, it's for rebalance purposes. I'm gonna look at the top, the bottom, and I'm gonna forget a little bit more about the middle, assuming that all stocks are great and I love all of them, right? But if you're retired and then you need to withdraw funds and you need to sell some positions, it could be hard to determine which one you sell. And Jean came with this idea of imagine that you manage your portfolio like a hockey club, with 4 lines, one top line, second line, third line, and then the fourth one's not that great, right? And his system was a little bit more complex, but I tried to summarize it in a easy way to shoot that to you in 10 minutes, so you get the principle and then you can adapt. The purpose of working with tier, so tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, or it's top line if you're a hockey fan. So you don't want to have all your it's impossible to have all Connor McDavids and Leon Draisaitl, right, in your team. We all wish we want that, but it's just impossible unless you're Warren Buffett, and even then you make mistakes, right? So here's how to split your portfolio between your top line and your fourth line. So top line, you have your largest position. So in my case, my largest position that is allowed is 10%. So see that as your cap allocation. You cannot sign Draisaitl for more than $12 million a year. That's your cap. So in this case, it's 10%. So I ideally have one or maximum two stocks that would be between 8 to 10, because as soon as it reaches 10, I'm going to trim for 2% and bring it back to 8. So at all time, when I look at my portfolio, I would like to have about 2 position in the 8 to 10%. Then you can your second line, and your second line should have a little bit more players. Usually those are players that have performed well, outperform the rest of your portfolio, likely outperform the market as well. So then I establish a weight of between 4 to 8%. Oh, and I forgot, the idea is to have 30 stocks in this portfolio. Equal weight should be 3.3%. So it gives you an idea of what's the ideal weight of each of them. So if you want to go above 3%, you will have line number 2 and line number 1. Line number 1 is between 8 to 10%. Line number 2 between 4 to 8. So those are overweight position in your portfolio. And then you have your third line, those grinders, those that are doing the work, and often they are you can change them for another one. That doesn't make much difference, but they can pull out a very strong shift and change the game. So those are the position that should be between that 3 and 4%. So around the equally weight. Of course, stock prices move all the time, so it's impossible to have everyone at 3.3. So having the first line above 8%, the second line between 4 and 8, and then the third line is between 3 and 4%. And then you got your fourth liner that you can include some of your rookies as well. So companies that you're just building right now, you're looking at them, you want them to play, but you don't want them to have a major impact of your portfolio. You don't believe it's going to happen. If you're an Abs fan, you probably think of like Ivan Demidov that is playing in the KHL. He started with like very little time, even though he was likely one of the best, if not the best player of that team. But he's a recruit. He's going to go play for the Abs next year. So there's not little incentive in the KHL to have him play. So that's why very small importance in the team. So your fourth line should be stocks between 3%. Personally, I don't want to have any stocks that are meaningless. So I don't want to have like those 0.5, 0.3% position. So I'm trying to have everything above 1.5%, and ideally all of those should be very close to that 3%. So to something that would be perfect. So once you have classified your portfolio like this, then you can add some layers of portfolio management. So it gives you a pretty good idea, but then you want to make sure that you don't have the same sectors on the same line, right? So in your top line, so those position 4 to 8%, if you have like 5 stocks in those and 3 of those 5 are in the same sector, well, you're likely going to be overweight. So you want to make sure that you spread your similar type of player on different lines, right? So you want to have like centerman, you want to have like right wing, left wing, pretty much the same idea. So you don't want to have like 5 stocks in the tech sector in your top line like position of like 4 to 8%, because if this sector is having a rough patch, well, your entire portfolio is going to suffer. Again, if you enter a new position, then you can put it on the fourth line. Slightly under 3%, so maybe at 2%. So you get to know the company, you get to follow the quarters, you get a little bit more accustomed to it. And if you're making mistakes at this point, it's not the end of the world. And then, depending on how they perform, you can move them or drop them from one line to another. So that's how you can manage your portfolio and make it easier. When you're about to sell, that makes it even more interesting, because imagine that 3 of your guys from the line 3, so 3 to 4, now are over 4%. So you probably become a little bit more overweight in that tier on your top line. Now maybe you have like 8 or 6 stocks between 8 to 4 to 8% of weight, and this is probably where you should be trimming instead of trimming your top stocks or just reinvesting in your bottom line. You could also look between your line number 2 and number 3, so you can have like a more balanced portfolio across sectors, across weight, and not having too many people on the same line. Because I mean, let's be honest, if you have like 12 players that could play on the second line but could not play on the third or on the first one, it's going to be hard to have a winning team, right? So based on this category, I look at my overall portfolio. So like combining my RRSP, my TFSA, my non-registered, everything that I have, and my pension account. So I noticed that right now I have only one player on my number 1 line. So I definitely have like just one Connor McDavid, and it's Apple. Apple is right now close to 10%, so it's going to be trimmed, but it's the only one above 8% in my portfolio. And then I have a very strong second line with National Bank, Microsoft, Brookfield, Costco, Constellation Software, and Alimentation Couche-Tard that is very close to being on the first line at over 7% of my portfolio. So those stocks, I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stocks above 4%. So between 4 to 8. And then I have a solid third line. I'm very happy about that third line, which you have Visa, BlackRock, TELUS, Amazon, that is like one of my rare non-dividend paying stock, Royal Bank, and Home Depot. So that is my top 13 out of 30 stocks. Very solid. But one thing I realized here by doing this exercise is I'm giving a little bit more too much weight on those 13 stocks and not enough on the bottom 17, because I have great companies on the 17 stocks, such as Automatic Data Processing or CCL Industries or Savaria and Thuromont Industries. Not Savaria, sorry, but Stella Jones. But all of those are like 2, 2.5, 2.7, but they're not even at 8%. They're not even at 3%. So going forward, I might do a few check here to maybe like lower the weight trim a little bit more in my top 2 line, and then send a little bit more love to those on the 4th line. So just maybe bring them from 8-10 minutes to 12 minutes a game, so they could play a little bit more, have a better impact, and they are like pretty good players over there. So yeah, that's it. That was a fun way to come back from a Buffalo game, Bills, talking a little bit more about hockey. So if you're not into sport, you probably found this one pretty much boring, but I'm sorry, guys. Sometimes I just want to have fun with this podcast. But long story short, I think that by having those tier or like top lines, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it will help you see how your money is spread across your portfolio and maybe bring some adjustments. So I'm going to think about this one, but I think it would make sense to maybe buy like a 0.25, 0.50% weight of each of those smaller positions that I have in my portfolio to just have it more equally weighted overall. So that's just for a better diversification, not to depend for a handful of stocks or a handful of players to win the game or to achieve your financial goals. All right, Moose, that's enough for today. I hope that you have enjoyed this podcast. We're going to talk again tomorrow. And until then, don't forget to stay invested.
Hey, welcome to the disclaimer. If you're listening to The Moose and the Loose, you cannot really expect me to give you buy or sell recommendation or financial advice, right? You're here for fun, you're here for information and some entertainment. But I am not your financial advisor, I am not your broker, so therefore I'm not liable if you're losing money after listening to the podcast. If you're looking for some advice, go see a professional. If not, you can enjoy the show and do your due diligence after it.